It is no mere accident of fate that determines who thrives on change. It is totally in our control. I have decades of experience dealing with change and learning to manage change and learning how to thrive on change. Some of those changes were good changes and changes I wanted, and some of them were very challenging, very difficult. But either way, I've learned that we can develop the skill of thriving on change. In this course, I'm going to cover the types and sizes of changes, why people resist change, and strategies for thriving on change. I'm also going to talk about organizational change, workplace change, and how you can become a change agent. So let's get started. Basically, there are two kinds of change, those we want and those we don't want. And of course, the ones we want are a little easier to deal with, but even then they can be difficult or challenging. For example, I was an employee for 20 years. I worked as a secretary for 20 years, and then I decided to start my own business. That was a huge change. I mean, it was something I wanted, but I had never owned a business. Plus, I was changing from the secretarial administrative profession to going into training and wanting to be a speaker and a trainer and a coach. So like I said, even though that was a change I wanted, it still had a lot of challenge and opportunity. Of course, the changes that are forced upon us are really difficult. Then there are minor changes and major changes. Maybe there's a few in between, but let me give you a few ideas. So minor changes could be a new neighbor, a new hairstylist, a route to work, a new boss, or a new work location. Major changes could be moving, especially out of state, death of a loved one, a marriage, a divorce, children leaving home, or losing a job. Now, maybe as you heard my list, you thought to yourself, well, I wouldn't really consider that a major change. I would consider that a minor change. I'll give you my personal example, the one about moving. So I moved out of state 8 different times. Most of those moves were because of my husband's career. Now, the first time I moved out of state, it was a really big deal for me. After all, I was leaving, a home that I grew up in, a city, Cleveland, Ohio, that I had lived in a great deal of my life. And so the first time I moved out of state, it was huge. It was monumental. It was overwhelming. Well, then as I went down that path, we started moving to different states because my husband was offered good job opportunities. And so we would pick up and we would go. And it got to a point where moving out of state was no big deal. It was a lot of work, but it wasn't a big deal. I got the hang of it. Well, I have an older sister, and I'll never forget when she was moving just to different neighborhoods, a different neighborhood, I should say. In Cleveland, Ohio, she was moving from one suburb to another suburb to a beautiful, actually, neighborhood. And it was stressful for her. It was a really big deal. In my mind, of course, I'm thinking, well, that's not a big deal. Move out of state. You have to find, new hairdressers, cleaners, churches. I mean, everything. You start all over. But I understood that in her mind, it was a big deal. So when we talk about change, it's subjective. In other words, what you consider a minor change, I might consider a major change. Vice versa, what you consider a major change, I might consider a minor change, right? It depends on how many changes we've gone through and what we've experienced. The idea here is for us to be empathetic. When we hear others talk about changes they're going through, try to be understanding. Instead of maybe thinking in your mind, well, that's no big deal, get over it, move on, offer that support. Remember, change is subjective, or I should say, the size of change is subjective.